Happy Easter, everyone, for those who are celebrating. This week, I'm thrilled to be joined by Richard DeLorenzo, along with Roxy Mourant and Jessica Enderson from CBE Ignited, as we dive into our powerful conversation about competency-based education and their transformational book, Competency-Based Education Ignited. These three leaders are not only challenging the traditional educational model, they're offering a bold, systematic, wide solution that's already making waves across the world. Before we begin, I want to quickly remind everyone that Charlie Peck and I will be hosting a free webinar April 29th from 6:30 to 8:30 Eastern Time, and this is for the TMI and Thriving Educator group to share practical tools and strategies for supporting students' well-being in schools. We're going to have awesome special guests, Julie Schmidt-Hassan, Mike Sipple Jr., and Herb Monroe, to provide a ton of resources, but we're also going to be hosting this for all educational positions. So it doesn't matter if you're an administrator, district leader, school counselor, teacher leader, or school social worker. This is going to be transformational as we're going to be discussing mental health support in your school or district. We're going to have the link in the show notes for you, which will be an opportunity for you to reserve your spot for this really impactful event. Now, let's get into this conversation with these three phenomenal guests as we are going to be really discussing the purpose, vision, and strategies that can change the way we think about teaching and learning for your classroom and for your school. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. All right, Aspire Leaders, if you're watching on YouTube, you see that I have a whole host of folks on the screen with me, and they're all over the world. Literally, I've got Richard out in Italy, and we've got folks in different time zones, but I'm super excited to have everyone here. I've got Roxy Mourant, Jessica Enderson, and Richard DeLorenzo, and I'm so excited because they have not only a phenomenal book that I have in hand, but they have a beautiful company that is really trying to revolutionize the world of education. I'm so excited to dive into that, but let's get a chance to meet each one. So Roxy, will you just start us off and let us know a little bit about yourself and your educational leadership journey?
Yeah, thank you, Joshua. It's so good to be online and just to be able to share the story with others and our passion. I've been in education in Alaska for quite a few years, since the 80s, and classroom teacher and then administrator at the university level, state level, trying to help policy change, but really hands-on. So I still, now that I'm a grandma, I'm in the Washington State area, and I've got grandkids that I help with robotics and Science Olympiad, just trying to help teachers see that there is a better way to do things.
Yeah, love it so much. Richard, will you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I was a special education teacher up in Alaska decades ago, and I just saw how the system doesn't work for all kids. And so I committed myself to go on a journey to begin with my classroom and then scale it with districts and states and other countries. And it's really about putting all the best practices into one system. And it's a daunting task because there's so much inertia in the traditional system that you have to overcome. But it is absolutely the right thing for the children and for the teachers. So I'm really excited to be here with you, Josh. And again, I really admire the work that you've done and that I've seen on your podcast.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Jessica, what about you? Will you share a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks again. As I echo the same sentiment for having us on, Josh. This is exciting and something we're all passionate about. So we all have that in common. I started my journey as a classroom teacher, similar to Roxy and Rich, and just realized that wasn't doing everything I could to meet my learners and their needs. And so that transitioned into a leadership role where we were able to transition our building to a competency-based building, and just being able to see firsthand the positive impact that had on learners, and to be able to walk in the halls and the classrooms. Kids were excited. They didn't want to go home at the end of the day, which is usually the opposite problem that you hear about nowadays. And just that passion and love for learning, that just really ignited this fire that I wanted to help other people in this journey. And the transition, like Rich mentioned, it's heavy. It can be a lot. But one of the things that I'm really passionate about is helping break it up into smaller, more manageable, easy to understand pieces, that it doesn't all have to happen at once. And just really keeping kids in mind first and making decisions. So again, excited to be here and share a little bit about our journey and how we're trying to help transform our system.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to introduce the topic today, which is the competency-based education. And Richard, will you just share a little bit about what you've seen over your experience? I know over the past 50 years, there's obviously been a lot of reform that's occurred in the world of education. But as far as competency-based education, we just kind of give us a definition of what that looks like and potentially why you think it's sustainable for all schools.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about what competency-based education.
For sure.
From our perspective, what it is that you really have a clear roadmap of what you want every child to now be able to do. And you have not only the targets, but you have the assessments. And kids go at their own rate, which is at a teacher pace or an accelerated rate. The reason it's so necessary is because basically traditional systems, from my experience, is teachers are winging it in isolation. They can go to the same school, 3 to third grade classrooms, and the way they approach literacy or mathematics is entirely all over the place. And that's what I see. That's why we're having such a difficult time achieving at those high levels. So that's one of the key pieces. But Josh, I want to be really clear that there's a bunch of other pieces that you have to consider as you kind of move into this new paradigm. But that's the essence of what makes us different.
Wonderful. Roxy, will you just share a little bit about our teacher mindset and what maybe needs to shift for them to be successful from going to a traditional model to the competency-based learning environment?
Sure. As Rich said, a lot of teachers work in isolation. At this point in time, I work with some of the best teachers, and it's frustrating because they don't feel valued. Their demands are harder and harder and harder. And without a good system in place, you really are just doing triage. You hope to use the best curriculum and keep track of the kids, but in reality, you're really catering to 50 to 80% of your kids. You're not doing all of them. So in a teacher's perspective, for me, teaching in a competency-based system, I would never want to go back because I see those lights go on with the kids. Even the kids that are very reluctant learners, for one reason or another, they either struggle or they're so smart, they're bored. And so having a system in place in my classroom where they can come in, they already know what to do. They need a little guidance, and I'm more of a facilitator than knowing all the answers, and we learn together, and it's really fun. Not that I don't intentionally direct them in certain spots when they're ready, but it's able with a LMS system, with the technology today, you can group the kids as they need to, change it daily. And it's just so much more rewarding because you see the kids engaged and discipline is out the window. There's no problem because kids are doing what they want to do and they're excited. And boy, if you stop them on their project, they're like, just out of my way. Like Jessica was saying, I had kids that say, please, can't we stay until 10 or can we spend the night and every weekend, And I'm like, no, you need to go home and try this out. So yeah, as a teacher, it's very inspiring because I see the difference between a system that works and a system that struggles.
All right, Jessica, I'm going to throw it your way just to get the student perspective. You had talked about them not wanting to leave and having fun, but also I'm wondering what's the difference between their experience with the traditional classroom versus the competency-based education system.
Yeah, that's exciting. I think that's where we really see that transformation happen. And I think it's more about me as a learner and taking ownership. And that's so different because as Roxy was explaining, in a teacher-directed classroom, the kids can kind of be the bystanders. They can be on autopilot, and that's okay. They can get by that way. But in a competency-based system, it's about you as a learner, what you need, that just-in-time feedback to help you grow and get better. And so learners they're intrinsically motivated. It's not just about all of their external factors. And so that's one of the huge shifts and changes that we see first in our learners is it's really learner directed and they understand that and they're in the driver's seat and they know that. And what a cool experience for a 5 or 6 year old to love learning and understand learning in that light and to be able to carry that through. That's a pretty powerful experience. And to be able to see that and witness that firsthand, it's unforgettable. And it's such an awesome experience. So it's really the transition and the shift from understanding that it's not just teacher directed, that we're actually here for learners, and that me as a learner, I'm in control. I'm in the driver's seat. I understand what I need to know, when I need to know it, and what's coming up next in my learning journey and how I best learn. So those are just some of the highlights and the shift that we see in our learners as they're in a competency-based system. The neat thing is I get to see this from a parent's perspective, which is, a much closer look, but having 3 girls go through a CBE system, it is transformational. We all know our kids, our own children as parents, they don't learn in the same way and in the same time frame. So being able to experience that from a parent's perspective takes it to a whole new level.
Richard, I'm going to throw it back to you as far as school leadership. I know that I have a lot of aspiring and current leaders that are listening right now to this, and they're probably listening to all the phenomenal things that can be done in the school. I'm wondering, how can our leaders support and guide their staff to make this transition so that way everyone's, like you said, on the same page versus in isolation doing their own thing?
Great question, Josh. In fact, Jessica and I are writing a book for leaders and to really try to help them on that journey, what that looks like. So a couple of things that need to happen, first of all, is you have to understand what your role is as a leader, as a principal or superintendent. And then what we see, where we see the gaps is the culture of the organization. It's oftentimes we don't see a positive, engaging culture. It's much more. It's something different than that. And the other piece is, what does an excellent teacher look like in every classroom in the traditional system? Because I think we want to hold on to some of the good things that are happening. And then the third thing is, what is the scope and sequence of the learning? What does a graduate look like? What do we want them to know and be able to do? And what does that look like in a real granular perspective? And that's what doesn't exist out there. We still are locked into the credit hours. And again, it's a hit and miss approach, and it's not clearly laid out about the targets, the assessment, the instructional delivery system. And so in the CBE system, our leaders need to understand what is best practices. And if they understand that, they'll be much more confident in leading it. Again, as Jessica said, we don't want them to take a huge bite out of this. We want them to go very cautiously and very carefully and build upon their strengths and their achievements as they move along.
So Roxy, I know this can be a long process to start to implement. I'm curious about some of the biggest challenges that teachers see as they're implementing this, or maybe some missteps that you've seen as you've been working alongside them to get them to the CBE format.
Great questions, Josh. You've been in this a while. I love it. I think about some of the teachers we work with, they want to believe it, but they're very hesitant to think that it will work in their community with their students. And so what we'll do is we'll go in and do like a STEAM Fest where you take over the school for 4 days and work with their students in their classrooms. And then the teachers, it's a fishbowl. So they're watching and we're coaching as we're teaching and talking about here's what it looks like and modeling it for them. And it's so fun because you watch, especially the ones, it's like a smoker that quit smoking, those that are the most negative, when they transform and realize the possibility of seeing all of their learners succeed, they're the biggest advocates. It's fun to watch the teachers transform like we do with the students, but then we have a consensogram because we've known, we've made a lot of mistakes on the way and we've learned from bad and good experiences. But if you don't have 80% on board, ready to die for this, it probably isn't going to work, so you're going to have to do some more work before people are believing it. So we have a game, a consensogram, where people vote and it's anonymous, and then immediate results, just like you do in a CBE system for the students. Immediate results, here's the feedback, here's what we're seeing, and we'll continue to work with you, but it's not going to be a full transformation until you have at least 80%.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw it to Jessica. As I know you guys have gotten a lot of awards, recognition over this, and I want to know maybe some specific significant changes that were happening on the campus. So like when you implemented this for multiple years, how did it impact student success?
Well, I think first of all, it changes not only the learning environment, but just the overall culture. And that permeates beyond the individual school, the school district. You can sense that in the community. And I sense that even visiting local businesses or organizations in town, I would go out and I would have conversations around what was happening in the school or the district, how it affected them, and then ask for their feedback. And it really was amazing to see the transformation and how they thought about learning in general. We think about learning from our lens, and our lens is very different. It was a very traditional, school system. Everyone was in the same place at the same time. And so to be able to flip kind of how we think about learning, that's a huge step in itself. And so that was one of the areas where it's a shift in culture and climate. And again, it's not just your learner and your building or district. It really does extend throughout the community. And they have so much more ownership in what's happening in the schools. I think sometimes we feel like as community members, we aren't connected. We're just, hearing about it in the newspaper or news. And that changes their lens and perspective, that they do feel like they are proud of their district and they see learners that are active in the communities. And so that's one of the biggest shifts, is just a change in culture and mindset. And that affects so many areas of our lives. Roxy mentioned like burnout and teachers aren't feeling valued. I think this is one of the issues that it comes down to, is how we think about learning in that process. And as adults, a lot of it is based on our convenience. And that affects our learners in a non-positive way. So if we can bring it back to what's at the heart, what's best for kids, and help make that cultural shift, it really affects not only the district, but the community as well. And what better way to give back to your community as a leader than to transform a system? Because now you're leaving a legacy that is so much more beyond just what you're doing in this moment. And that's really exciting to see. So that was a shift that I sensed and felt. And I feel that in other communities that I'm a part of, helping their districts make this transition.
So I had talked about the book, and Richard, I'm going to have you talk about this just a little bit further, but it's Competency-Based Education Ignited. I'm curious why you felt like this was necessary as far as a resource for our educators, and how you see this resource reforming education.
Well, I was really fortunate, Josh. I had a chance to scale this in the country, tens of thousands of schools. And it was the right time, the right organization behind me to do this. And I've always been frustrated that I cannot scale it in America. And so when I came back from Russia, I decided to write this book with the support of Solution Tree and with Roxy's help to really kind of point out the roadmaps. So like, if you're going to do this, here are the steps you take. And even if you don't go all the way, if you do 3 or 4 of the steps, your system will be a better system. So we wanted to have a really kind of hands-on, very clear roadmap about what it is like for a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent. So they really get it, because it begins and ends with the leadership. And that's where the biggest gap is right now, especially with our political divide and our attrition rate of our educators now post-COVID, the academic achievement results, which are very, very much in a downward trend. At some point, it's going to level off and people are going to want to do something better. And so we want to be positioned to help those people that want to do that. And we also want to find, like I had in Russia, political business leaders who want to get behind us, because if you have a world-class education system, you will have a world-class economy. And that's the disconnect that I see.
Well, it's a beautiful book. You're talking about a roadmap. It's got so many things as far as activities, figures, examples, templates. It's literally laid out for you. So I'm going to have the link in the show notes for everyone, also on joshstamper.com. I hope everyone takes advantage of that link and grabs a copy, because I know it's going to help a lot of our educational leaders and teachers. And Roxy, I want to talk about the business that you all have, and I would love for you just to share about how you support schools and school districts to help them with the competency-based education system.
Thank you, Joshua. Well, we depend a lot on people like you to get the word out, and our contacts. When you've been in education a long time, you tend to meet people. Rich has a great fly fishing business that he goes around the world and he meets these people that are influencers. So just through, word of mouth and knowing that we've got a hope, we've got a way to help people. So I guess
Cheers.
In the business sense right now, it's all referral based. And so when people say, hey, can you help us? The first thing we want to know is, how serious are they? So meeting with the leadership team and then figuring out, do they have a consensus of people that are the stakeholders? And then if they do, we're hands-on and we're in there 3 to 5 years at least, and expecting that they then will help others as they go along.
All right. I need to find out more about this fly fishing business that you got, Richard. So maybe we'll talk later. But Jessica, I
Absolutely.
know that I know you guys are embracing AI too within the mastery system. I'm curious how that technology is being utilized specifically for what we're talking about.
Yeah, this is an exciting, I think, focus for us. And it's incredible to see every week how it's transforming, right? And there's all of these new tools and resources. So with that, it can also be overwhelming. But I think it's important for people to note it's okay to go slow before you just jump in to go fast. You want to make sure you have a good understanding and the impact and implications for your learners and your system. So I'll say that first and foremost. But I just explain to people it's not a replacer, it's really an enhancer. And so once you understand the important role that AI can play in helping personalized content, for example, teachers don't have time to spend 8 hours personalizing and differentiating learning pathways, for 30 to 150 learners, depending on their environment. AI will absolutely transform the way that you do that. So it's such an exciting tool and resource. I think as educators, we should embrace AI. I think it's okay to be cautious about, the way that we embrace it, but we have to understand it's not going anywhere. And we feel like it's really, right at the forefront of what we're doing. And we see, can you imagine our learners 5, 10, 15 years from now, the impact it's going to have on their everyday lives? So I feel that it's really important that we embrace it and that we understand that it's not replacing our roles and what we do, but in fact, it's allowing us to kind of get out of the way for the day-to-day mundane tasks. So we have more time to spend with our learners in a teaching role or as a principal with the staff to help them grow and get better. And so I use AI every day. It enhances what I do. It has totally brought, our capabilities to a whole new level. And I think we're only scratching the surface. So I'm very optimistic for the role that AI plays, not only in our lives as educators, but also our lives as learners. Also knowing and understanding that, yes, it can be used in a negative way. It can do damage, but it's like anything else. We just have to have a good level of understanding where it's appropriately used and how it can help, I guess, just enhance the learning experience for our kids.
And Josh, just to add on to what Jessica said, in a
Mhm.
CBE system, an AI-run learning management system is the answer because we know we've agreed on what we want kids to know, be able to do. The AI is an accelerator of learning, and that's the power of AI. But also, what Jessica said, that we want to be cautious because kids get really smart at using AI. They'll be much smarter than the teachers. So we want to set up conditions for them to use it and not to use it. So we really are developing those skill sets that we want kids to have in the 21st century.
One of our partners, John Bergman, he did the flipped classroom and now does mastery. So he's working with us. We've got some online courses that teaches a little bit about how to use AI in a classroom well and what to avoid and stuff. And I know, Jessica, you just wrote an article too that we've got on our website or will have on AI. So it is a very appropriate topic because a lot of teachers are struggling with it and how do you use it well?
Roxy, is that course on your website?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. All right. So everyone can go over to cbeignited.org, and that will be within the courses that they have available. And I just want everyone to go to that website because there's so many different things on there that's going to support educators. So make sure that you're heading over there. I'll make sure the link is everywhere, show notes, websites, and then, of course, YouTube description. Richard, you had mentioned real quick about a new book within that leadership scope. I would love for you just to give a sneak peek of what that's going to be touching on. And then also, I know that Solution Tree, and at the request of someone special, wanted this book out in the world. And I know it's going to support a lot of our leaders. But if you can just give us a little synopsis of what that book's going to look like and why people should check it out.
Yeah, the first I was lucky enough to do the first book with Roxy on CBE Ignited, but this time I've recruited Jessica to be my co-author on this. And Jessica and I both believe that the leadership aspect is missing. We believe, and again, not to be offensive to university systems, but when I went through all of my administrative credentials, and I think Jessica and Roxy would say the same thing, we weren't given the tools and processes to really understand how the systems work and then how to move the system in a new direction. So Jessica and I put our heads together for the last 3 months really looking at all the research, all the business leaders out there, and all the different structures of leadership, and really adopted it for teachers, principals, and superintendents. So we give them the roadmap of how to lead the change that needs to happen. We think that's the biggest gap right now. That's going to happen. Our book, CBE Ignited, it's there. But again, I think only 2 to 3% of the leaders out there will do it. We're trying to figure out how do we get to that tipping point. We have 16,000 school districts in America. If we can get to 10% of those districts, that will be the tipping point for the American education system. And I know that because I was able to do it in Russia with over tens of thousands of schools. So I know it's possible. I just need the opportunity. So that's why we've written the book. Jessica, anything else you want to say?
No, I think the other thing that we acknowledge in the book is it's okay wherever you're at in this whole process of becoming the leader that you know you want to become, that we're recognizing we need leaders to become. What we're really passionate about is just like we want for our learners, we want to meet you where you're at and give you the tools and processes to help you grow and get better. And that's really what this book is about. Whether you feel like you're in survival mode or if you're in the sustaining mode, wherever you're at in your leadership journey, we just want to help however we can move you kind of to that next level and to challenge you. So that way we have leaders that are building strong systems inside of our districts and then also within organizations and businesses as well.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait for this resource to come out. So make sure that you are checking out the website, checking out and following on social media with the various links to make sure that you're getting a sneak preview of when that release date will be and that you're grabbing that resource in addition to the one that we're talking about today. But I want to have this question go to all three of you. So I'll make sure I direct it to each one of you. But as far as a starting point, if they want to get ignited with CBE tomorrow, the next day, here soon, to transform the educational environment that they have, what would be the advice that you would give them? So Roxy, do you mind kicking us off?
Sure. Yeah. Back to our website and online courses. We have a mini course that Jessica developed called What is CBE? So Introduction. And of course, the book would help. But just having a conversation about what is it that we want to change? And honestly, what is it we want our kids to know and be able to do? I don't think we answer that question very well. So, I know people are very authentic in wanting to help their kids. A lot of people just don't know what the next step is. But modeling what we're talking about, we want to help the same way we would want you to teach your children. Where are you at right now? What would be your next step? And we can help with that.
Richard, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we do in the book is we want you to do a needs assessment to kind of see where your current system is around culture, around your curriculum, around professional development. And in that, it becomes obvious where your next steps are. And as Roxy said, our goal is to guide you and support you along that journey.
Jessica, did you add anything else?
Well, I think in addition to the tools and resources, one thing that you could do right now as a leader is just get rid of all the noise, bring your staff together, and just really look for clarity. You have to define, like Roxy mentioned, what do we want our kids to know? What do we want them to be like? What skills do we feel are really important? And so by providing kind of that clarity, we call it the shared values and beliefs around learning, it really will set the stage for success. It's that foundation that you can build upon. But without that first step, that clarity and why do we exist? What is our purpose? I feel that kind of skips over the why of the transition process, which is really important. So once you get to that point, as Roxy and Rich mentioned, we have a plethora of tools and resources, and we're there to support in any way we can. But just starting with asking those really important questions.
Josh, I think I'd like to say is 20 years ago, I worked with districts that are still doing this and they have really positive trend data. So I'd like to recognize Westminster School District out of Colorado, out of Denver, and Lindsay Unified School District out of Central California. So these are the people that really have the right system, the right leadership in place, and we guided them through that. And now they become flagships of a CBE system for not only within America, but other countries that have actually come to watch what they do. My disappointment is why doesn't all 50 states embrace this? Why don't we get people around to really create a world-class education system. We know what it takes. We know how to do it. We have the technology. It's very frustrating for us that it has not gone quicker.
Well, I hope with the conversation today that we're starting to change some minds and get them to at least dig in some more. And I want to make sure that, we have an opportunity to share out not only your website, but social media links or handles that people can follow you. So Richard, where would be the best way to connect with you all?
For me, it's through our website that there's a link, right, Roxy, for all of us on there that they can contact us. And again, Josh, we're there to guide you. We're there to support you. It's not about money for us. It's not about power. It's not about our egos. We just have a moral purpose to help children and help teachers across the world. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. For those who are listening, I'm going to have, Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, they all the different links for you to connect with these wonderful educators and leaders. And then, of course, I want you to know that you can reach out because these folks have a servant heart. They want to do what's best for the world of education, for leaders, for students, for parents, and just love your book. I can't wait for the second one. And I hope everyone that's listening is grabbing the resource, but then also connecting with these phenomenal folks. So with that, I just want to thank you all for joining me. And Richard, I guess I'm going to have to figure out what fly fishing bait you use and where you go. And hopefully it's in the Colorado area.
That's great.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.